Welcome viewers. On behalf of Iravati Research and Communication Center, this is your host Pratim Ranjan Bose. In this edition, we will discuss the importance and status of India-UK Free Trade Agreement or FTA. I have with me Mr. Debasish Mallick, former Deputy Managing Director of Export-Import Bank of India. Mr. Mallik has vast experience of working in many financial institutions. He is now an independent director in many financial sector intermediaries, including the National Pension System or NPS. India has a trade surplus with the UK. It is a crucial market for Indian IT companies. According to the British government, total UK imports from India amounted to £21.6 billion in the 4 quarters to the end of Q1 2023. So that means April-March, which is equivalent to Indian financial year. So Indian exports to UK is up by 28%. During the period, British exports to India, that is amounting to £14.7 billion, and total trade was £36.3 billion, up by 34.2%. As you are aware, FTAs became an important tool to trade in the post-COVID protectionist world. The WTO-sponsored non-discriminatory or MFN tariff regime suffered as countries, both rich and poor, resorted to tariff wars. India is entering trade agreements with many key partners, and UK is one of them. The two countries have completed 12 rounds of talks, resolving 19 out of 26 chapters. The 13th round of discussion is scheduled this month. With this, let me go to Mr. Mallik. Sir, according to latest reports, the negotiations may hit a slow track. And as the UK authorities have already clarified that they would, it is entering into the harder area, and they would prefer to go for more thought-out resolutions than quick fixes. So will you please explain what's taking time? Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Bose. Thank you for inviting me for this important webinar or presentation, if I may say. The topic India-UK FTA is increasingly becoming important, and a very topical FTA, I must say, not merely because it is on how much can trade expand between India and UK. That's a bilateral relation that's extremely important. There is no doubt about it, especially UK being a very important market for Indian IT products, offers a tremendous scope. Plus UK, despite whatever has happened over the Brexit issues and all, remains a very important and formidable market where, and with London being the capital, there has been a lot of demonstration effects if you're present there or not present there. So that is one aspect of the whole story, which is essentially a bilateral aspect. What is more important is that what this UK-India FTA would imply is we would be setting a lot of rules, lot of regulations, lot of conventions, if we complete this particular FTA satisfactorily, that can actually lead us on a template for further discussion and further FTAs, which we are likely to enter into with many other countries in the course of years. What essentially happens, FTAs by all means are essentially customized. FTAs are never set rules and you follow that rules. It never happens that way. FTAs happens at various levels and various plenaries. But essentially what is important there is that rules and regulations, if it has been negotiated somewhere and accepted by somewhere, by some countries, actually lays a benchmark based on which the further negotiation with some other country or some other situations can take place. That is what is important. It is also important to note that it is one of the few FTAs which we are entering with a developed economy, the 5th largest in the world, not only 5th largest, but it's a developed economy. It is not a trade between an underdeveloped economy and a developing economy, or a developed economy vis-a-vis a developing economy. It's not like that. It is essentially a trade between a developing economy and an developed economy. And that developed economy and developing economy are today having an interaction or a discussion on like-to-like basis. And that is a very, very formidable thing. Like it would have been very, very easy and simple if India would have agreed to all sorts of discussions or all sorts of points which the developed world lays. Okay. And in that case, what would have happened is that all these contentious issues would have been cleared on the bedrock or template of something which might have been done 25 years back or 50 years back, or something which have been standardized throughout the world. But it did not happen that way, primarily because India is today a formidable economy. India is today an important market for everyone. India is today an important investment destination. And India is also an important market for attracting Indian investments overseas. It is not only that UK investments will come to India, but also Indian investments will go to UK. So these types of myriad possibilities, various things open up. And so obviously things have to be very, very carefully drafted and very, very carefully understood. Now, of the 26 chapters, you have actually, thank you, Mr. Bose, you've made my task very simple because I'm not very strong with data. And you have actually laid out the data points very succinctly and nicely. So out of the 26 chapters, regarding 19 chapters, negotiations have been completed, deals have been finalized. We know what they are. We know what are the rules, regulations. They have not yet come out in public domain, but that always happens with an FTA. I'm not blaming it for. But what is important is that 19 chapters out of 26 is a huge jump. Like 19 chapters have been negotiated to the satisfaction of both the countries is a very important promising steps. And obviously there are hiccups and there are problems which are likely to happen with a lot of others or with all this. Okay. So there was nothing strange about it or nothing astonishing about it. 19 chapters have been finalized is what is important. The other very important thing which you must appreciate, or which all readers or listeners would appreciate, is essentially that this is designed to be a comprehensive trade agreement. It's an FTA which is comprehensive and all-encompassing. It is not an FTA based on the early harvest agreement, which they say, which we had signed with many other countries recently with Australia, where essentially you actually settle only on certain particular segments of the economy, and going forward, you improve upon it or add new sectors and all. It's not basically a rollover type of thing. It is essentially a comprehensive discussion. UK Prime Minister wanted it. And I thought that it was a very wise and very well thought out things. Even if it takes 6 months more, it does not essentially matter because you will have all the ground rules regarding a lot of things clear. And as I said, that essentially this will lay the roadmap for negotiations with various other countries. And as a result, it is important that if you have more and more of sectors covered, actually it becomes important. Okay, it becomes a very good steps. Now, coming to the points which are actually causing the heartburns today, or which are this getting or appearing sticky today, okay, are important. See, we have come over a very, very formidable thing of duties on automobile and duties on whiskey. Okay, because Scotch whiskey, because those were two
UK's part, that is the very important thing.
Yeah, so these were two important asks of the UK government and UK industry and trade, and those have been satisfactorily resolved. Okay, as per publicly available data, what we find is that India has agreed to bring down the import tariff on cars produced in UK to a certain extent from 100% to 75%. 75% is enough of a tariff, I think, in Indian car companies and Indian auto companies, considering the huge number which they produce today, are definitely very efficient to, and also looking into it that the quality of Indian cars have been accepted far and wide. It should not be a formidable problem if you have a competitor coming, but with a 75% duty protection. The second thing is whiskey, okay, Scotch whiskey, which also occupies a very minuscule percentage of the market share. And so really speaking, it's not a formidable thing. But what is important is that these two hindrances or these two irritants have been taken care of. And so now we can go ahead with more important things. Now, what are left? One is IPR, intellectual protection right. That's left, a very formidable thing. What is left is data localization. Okay,
Data
that is the
protection.
second important thing. Data protection and data localization, that is very important thing. Bilateral investment treaty, that's an extremely important thing. But fortunately, the bilateral investment treaty one has been agreed to be kept out of the purview of the FTA proper, and it's a separate agreement or negotiation going on, which is expected to be completed along with the FTA. What I mean to say is that even if the bilateral investment treaty is not yet finalized, okay, it appears that the rest of the FTA can go ahead. So the early harvest with the bilateral investment treaty may not happen. Bilateral investment treaty records are pretty poor so far as India is concerned, because we have now a situation where actually we go by the 2016 uh, policy of BIT, or bilateral investment treaty, which has not been found acceptable with most countries. I think only about 4 or 6 BITs have been signed after the 2016 agreement. Essentially, the point there is something like the 2016 agreement says that you have to exhaust all domestic remedies available in the domestic market, that is in India, before you pursue a bilateral investment treaty. So obviously that means you go through the entire legal process in India, the entire court or adjudication process in India, which actually a lot of people consider to be notoriously slow and delayed and results in delay. So essentially that is one point. And
Just
so
for
what is,
understanding, sir, just for
yeah,
understanding, well, also for viewers, Mr. Mallik is also works as an arbitrator. So, in fact, I forgot to mention that. So here comes the legal side. You were saying that when a British company is investing in India and he needs a recourse, he has to exhaust all opportunities available in India before he goes to international court, something like that.
actually, Mr. Bose, what happens is that BIT, bilateral investment treaty, essentially is a treaty drawn up to protect private sector investment between two countries. Okay, so if UK investment comes to India, it is protected by the BIT, that is bilateral investment treaty, and if India investment goes to UK, that is also protected under the BIT, that is bilateral
Right.
investment treaty. So every country has a certain norms and certain standard regarding bilateral investment treaty which they will enter into. It need not necessarily be a mirror image, in the sense that India-UK bilateral investment treaty will not be the same in India and same in UK. Okay, it could be divergent, but countries will actually try to hold on to their thing. Now, if there is a dispute, and recently about that presumptive tax and preemptive tax with Mr. Pranab Mukherjee when he was the finance minister, he
Right.
introduced, which goes back to 50 years and all, there was a lot of dispute.
Right.
Okay, and that dispute got resolved recently. Now,
Tax in
one
retrospect.
area,
Tax in
tax in
retrospect.
retrospective taxation. That was the issue. Now, in retrospective taxation, what essentially happened is that, as per the BIT of 2016 in India, what is required is that you have to exhaust the legal remedies which you have in India before you can approach an international court or an arbitration process internationally. Normally, all BITs take protection under an arbitration clause. You have to, in case there is a dispute between two contending parties, for settlement, you have to go to an arbitrator. Usually, it's in Singapore International Arbitration Center or in London International Arbitration Center. We have recently passed our New Delhi International Arbitration Center Act, but it has not yet gained much currency. But right now, what is more popular is the Singapore one and the UK one. So essentially, what the 2016 Bilateral Investment Protection Agreement or Bilateral Investment Treaty says, that you have to first pursue the Indian legal process if you have a dispute. That means if a country has a dispute, it has to first go to the respective court here. It could be the
So which means
High
you
Court,
you are into
followed by the
that
Supreme Court.
logjam and it takes a lot of time. You keep wasting your
Yeah,
time
it
in
would
fighting
take
cases over
time
here.
because, yeah, arbitration is a faster process. So what they want is that they want to straight away go to arbitration. Now, if you really recall, it is a very interesting thing which had happened at that point of time, in case of Vodafone, actually, what had happened is
Yes.
that Bombay High Court had given a judgment in favor of the company. Supreme Court had given a judgment in favor of the company, and despite that, the Vodafone had to pursue an international arbitration to get the whole thing out. So essentially, after exhausting the internal remedial, domestic remedial process, you have to go overseas for arbitration filing to establish your claim. Now, all these things lead to delay, and also there is a dispute which is going on. Now, if you really look at it, why it becomes sticky and difficult is essentially it's an overall policy decision which is being taken. Now, if we in India, in this particular FTA, enter into a satisfactory resolution of this BIT problem, then also that has to be ratified by the cabinet. And I don't know whether it has to be ratified by the parliament also. Because the Indian BIT as it exists in 2016 talks in terms of essentially exhausting the domestic remedies, then only going overseas. But what Britain is asking is
That's
you overlook that and we start as a first step with the Singapore or the London Arbitration Center.
That's a
Now,
very
that
good
is one
point
part.
that you have hit, actually, because we have seen that just a month ago or so, there was this Data Protection Act came in. We didn't have it.
Yeah.
So which means that these are, as you said, that this FTA will create, and that also the various circles have been saying, or hinting at, is that it will help create a template to deal with other
Yeah.
nations. So it means that
Actually,
we
that is
were
what
not
is.
as ready for those things also.
Yeah. Actually, if you, Mr. Bose, if you really look at the context is like this, that UK till now, that is till 2016, didn't enter into an FTA. It was a part of the EU, European Union.
Right.
So entire thing was the European Union. The FTA or whatever was done was in congruence with whatever European Union did. And Europe itself was the market for all these British companies and all. So really speaking, they were less concerned about all this. You had borderless trade possible. And so you had a ready market there.
Right.
After 2016, after Brexit came, rather in 2020 or 21, after the Brexit was actually implemented, since then your UK has entered into 71 trade agreements, okay, FTAs, okay, because essentially they have lost the free access to the European Union market.
Right.
And they are actually trying to gain access to other country markets, okay, because and the world today is increasingly getting guided by the FTAs. So for UK, an FTA is important, and an FTA with a country as important and as large market as India is obviously makes it very, very important. So UK would also like to have an FTA which sets the ground rules. And India today is not a basket case anymore. So one can, in every negotiation, put forth that this is what India has agreed. And so it immensely makes sense if you have that. Otherwise, if you do not have that, you don't have a strong country with you. UK is today using it. My guess is UK would like to use it as a template, which is a very, very sensible and well accepted template internationally for further negotiations. So far as India is concerned, it's the same other way. One of the few FTAs, comprehensive FTA, please understand, it is not a early harvest FTA. It's a comprehensive FTA signed with a developed country. Very few of them are there in the Indian almanac. And as a result of that, they would also like to draft it very carefully so that it can provide the template for further negotiation. And obviously, both sides are very careful. We know about the IPR. I have told you about the BIT problem. The IPR problem essentially has been going on for years. One is the patent protection, and the other thing essentially is the data protection there, because and that is essentially India wants to protect the life-saving drugs industry.
Also, I believe after the Chinese experience, all these countries went for China, and
Yeah.
and the re-engineering, reverse engineering, they had to suffer, and the data loss and the technology loss, whatever. So I think there is reason to be a little bit extra finicky about it.
Yeah, extra finicky and extra careful. And actually, Mr. Bose, if you really look at it, we are actually negotiating hard on the IPR, not because we want protection of our literature or films. we are negotiating hard on the IPR because we want to have protection on the pharmaceutical industry, especially for life-saving drugs.
Right.
Now, no one can overrule the importance of it, and obviously you cannot take a casual approach there. Okay. There was a point of time when, even today, when a drug or a medicine which is life-saving is sold at an exorbitant price which is unaffordable.
Right.
So India government in the past has invoked the provisions of compulsory licensing to get those pharmaceutical products cheap. Now, what is there is that a patent stays back for 20 years. A patent life is 20 years. Now, these companies, because of their investments, they want it to be extended beyond 20 years. Now, India obviously is saying that I would not allow an extension beyond 20 years. So finally, that has been agreed upon. So for drugs and pharmaceuticals, now the world does not ask for a patent protection of 20 years. At the end of 20
We
years, you
saw
can
how
go for
important
derivatives.
it could be during COVID and that vaccine thing.
Exactly. And the patent protection essentially means the process, not only the manufacturing process to be known, but the data also has to be known, because when you come out with a medical product, you have to have it based on solid bedrock of data. So essentially, what he's saying is that the data also has to be protected. UK does not want the data to be divulged. That means whatever tests they have carried out, they want the data to be with them. Now, in that case, if an Indian company, let's say Cipla, produces a life-saving drug which is just out of the patent list of an UK company, Cipla will not be able to establish it in the Indian market, essentially because it would not have the backup data to claim the efficiency and efficacy. So essentially, there is a scope for discussion. There is a scope for very, very serious discussion on, or rather, why scope, a need for very, very serious discussion on the IPR. So IPR is important. BIT is important. That is bilateral investment treaty. Okay. You have another important area which has been left out is the procurement policy, because the overseas, uh, including the multilateral bodies, have been increasingly telling that India should remove all sorts of barriers to trade and all sorts of duty protection which it gives. Okay, so even in that realm, they have said that even in the government procurement policy, you should not have protection. Now, India has a price preference for MSMEs.
Right.
Because we need MSMEs to be protected, because in India, despite our phenomenal growth which has happened over the years, what is important is most of the production, most of the exports, and most of the jobs are created in the MSME sector, which are not very yet very equipped to fight against the global monopoly.
Right.
And as a result, it is necessary for them to have a price protection, other protection. Now, also that is being discussed as one of the items, which is very important. So public procurement policy is another item which is being discussed. I have told you 3 items out of the 6. All of them are not out. Actually, we do not know what are those 6 items, but from various readings here and there, we get this idea. So essentially, that is there. But my guess is that considering the importance of this, it would be quite a showpiece FTA. And I think what the British press is posturing today, could be essentially a very hard posturing. But I have a feeling that they are also interested in completing the comprehensive trade agreement soon. The British Prime Minister would not have asked for a comprehensive trade agreement. He would have also settled for an early trade agreement. Right. See, today, if to me it appears that if you look at the politics behind it, the politics is I'm going for an election. The British Prime Minister goes for an election.
I would have come to that. I would have come to that. Is,
yeah.
Also, I should say Indian media. I mean, we expect things to be done quickly, like all are complaining why it is not in India. The complaint is why it is not done. Okay. And in UK, it is about why you are doing. I mean, there are a lot of provocations, particularly the British Prime Minister being the son-in-law of Infosys founder. I mean, and the strong connection.
Yeah.
And also, we must not forget that he is a Hindu person over there. So so all these put together, so there is a lot of provocation. So whether to what extent that thing, so far whatever you say, that puts us into very nice perspective that why it should take time rather than jumping and straight away
Yeah, yeah.
into it.
But having said all that,
hmm.
you wanted to say
No,
something,
so that is
Mr.
what
Bose?
I was saying, that whether politics is also playing a part in this,
Yeah,
because they will go for it. Both the countries will go for election very soon.
yeah. Essentially, if you really look at it, I am no one to say, but still, see, if you really look at whatever, if you really look closely at whatever is happening as the UK in the UK, as available in the newspapers and in the public media, the political situation of the Conservative Party is really not very encouraging as yet. The Labour Party is quite breathing down the neck. There have been resignations from the Sunak cabinet, etc., etc. Now, one of the important things is that UK, really speaking till now, has nothing much to show as success after the Brexit.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, there could be umpteen reasons for it. I am not going into the discussion of what are the reasons, who is to blame, whether Sunak's policy is to blame. I don't know, and I'm not venturing into that. But what is important for Prime Minister Sunak and what is important for Britain today
And the
is to
country is
have,
suffering one of the worst inflation.
worst inflation and worst recession. Okay.
Right.
So what is important, and actually, if you look at it, a lot of things. Another important thing is that the bilateral business movement. Okay. So basically, some skilled workers here and there has to move. Now, if you really look at it, what has happened post Brexit is a whole lot of captive labor, which Britain used to get from European Union, relatively poorer countries of European Union, have stopped coming. People do not come from Portugal. People do not come from Poland. People do not come from so many other countries. Okay, I'm not in a position to name all of them, but so many other countries used to offer labor here in Britain. The entire financial services sector, okay, was based on almost European labor or European skilled personnel. So there is a need for skilled personnel and there is a need for labor in UK. So I don't think there would be very huge amount of protest or objection. Obviously, there will be objection and protest from the people in case you are allowing free immigration of people, free migration of people. But what I am saying is that essentially one has to look at that there are various aspects in this particular trade. And this trade, if it comes out, because of its landmark nature, which I told earlier, it would be a showpiece for Mr. Sunak to say. So Mr. Sunak can say that I have entered into a comprehensive trade agreement with India, which has laid the basis and foundation for future such agreements. It's a comprehensive trade agreement which actually helps me in getting X amount of growth in my trade data. So X amount of growth would lead to Y amount of investments, and Y amount of investments could lead to A amount of job creation. So essentially, that is a point which is there. Now, what actually, what people are hopeful, and which the British media always is a posturing issue at the end of it, but actually, a lot of people expect it to be completed by December.
Yeah,
okay, by this
that
calendar
was
year.
a very popular expectation.
Yeah, yeah. Now, if you really look at it, one important irritant, that is the bilateral investment treaty, has been kept out. So even if that does not happen, the rest of it can happen. IPR and all obviously will take time. It is not be not it will not be that simple. And I think IPR will have to be actually the focal point of discussion. I think bilateral investment treaty, more than bilateral investment treaty, IPR will be a very, very important thing which has to be discussed and negotiated and finalized. And I am reasonably hopeful that a meaningful progress, if not a full completion, will have to be made. On the political side, it is compulsory and necessary. Okay, less for India, more for UK to complete it by December. One reason being that Indian elections are still about a year away. Okay, I don't know, maybe not September, maybe not year, maybe 6 to 8 months away, whereas UK is looking at election in the next few months, couple of months.
And in our case, this FTA has no electoral impact. Zero
Actually,
electoral impact.
it does not have,
but
and
it
does
has
not
an
have
impact in their case.
The only flip side, there are 2-3 flip sides. One flip side is obviously the IPR. Another flip side is obviously the BIT. These are the two important flip sides. The third flip side is the point which you raised. Mr. Sunak's relationship with Mr. Narayan Murthy through Mrs. Prime Minister, and the huge fortune which Mrs. Prime Minister has acquired because of the parentage, that is the huge amount of
to put it simply, the link to the family link to Indian IT puts him in a spot that he is making things easier, or he may make things easier for Indian IT companies. And I hope,
Actually, if you look at it, Indian IT companies requires the UK market. There is no doubt about it. But UK requires Indian IT companies, essentially because it is not only, it's a great source, it's a very established and buoyant source in the world today. Technology provided by the Indian IT companies are a buoyant source and a very reliable source, which is cheap, which works, okay, and which is acceptable. So essentially, they have that issue. But the world around, if you have a point, because Mr. Sunak would also be having a lot of enemies in his
country.
What
comes out, sir, if there is a delay, it is more due to the political instability in UK. The country hasn't been stable for quite some time. The political establishment, there is successive change in prime ministership and etc. So, and with that background, now that Mr. Sunak is there and he has a link with Indian IT, so it may be having some immediate impacts or temporary impacts. But as you have rightly said, that they need it more. They need a faster implementation than maybe from our side. I mean, it is in our interest as well, equally. But there is a political compulsion on the UK side to complete it and to showcase something to the voters. So with that, let me just encapsulate it. So what you said is, generally, let me talk about the criticism in India probably, is that why it should take time, why it is not completed as yet. We think everything should be. But actually, this is one of things that we are doing. The first probably thing we are doing with the developed world, and it will be a template case. So we have to take our time. Otherwise, there will be impact on our own industry, like most critically, the pharmaceutical industry. I hope that's correct.
Exactly. That's precisely the point. You've hit the nail on the head. And actually, if you look at it, we have not signed the RCEP for our own reasons. We have not signed RCEP. And so that has not given access to a large share of the market. It is therefore critical for us to sign this in a comprehensive manner. And it is critical for UK also. So let us look up with optimism. Thank you, Mr. Bose.
Thank you, sir.
I thought that we had a very good and interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.